Hello, everyone. This is JT Keating, Vice President of Product Strategy here at Zimperium. I'd like to welcome you to another webinar, and this one we're very excited about. There's a sea change that we've been experiencing when it comes to a lot of mobility and the huge motion towards BYOD. And Microsoft, one of our partners, has a very interesting angle and a very interesting approach that we are now going to be a part of. We are now a part of. And so that's basically, a lot of folks are familiar with Intune from an MTD or MDM standpoint. We're now going to talk about it from a MAM standpoint. There's some really interesting things that are occurring. So before I dive in, just the usual perfunctory stuff. Please follow us on social media. We like to make sure that folks that are interested in the topic of mobile security, our Z-Labs teams, et cetera, are the best in the business. And so follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever happens to be your preference, to stay up to date on the topics. I'm going to try and keep this to 20, 25 minutes of content, Q&A at the end. If there is no Q&A, we don't make it up. We don't believe in doing that. We will just give you some time back to go grab a hamburger or whatever it is that you feel like doing for lunch or breakfast. And then please use the Q&A section, though, if you do have any interest or questions, including if you have any technical difficulties. We've had little technical difficulties ourselves when it comes to the chat function, so we don't really use that. So we're going to dive into this. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then tell you what I told you. We're going to first spend a little bit of time talking about the threats that are out there, a little bit about how we address the threats, because you need to know that part before you actually start talking about how does that now tie in to the Microsoft Intune for unmanaged devices, or Intune MAM is a technical way of kind of putting it. You kind of need to know how those pieces fit together. So I'm going to go through the threat stuff, and I'm going to go through the product stuff on the Zimperium pretty quickly, because the real key is how do these pieces all kind of fit together, and then we'll hammer that stuff at the very end. So let us dive in. First thing is a really important point we like to make at the beginning of every webinar, and that is the simple fact that today, what we traditionally refer to as endpoint security, the traditional endpoints, including a lot of those that are obviously the initial domain of our friends at Microsoft, represent about 40% of the endpoints in a typical enterprise today. 60% of the endpoints that are accessing corporate data are mobile. And by corporate data, I'm including Office 365 docs, Outlook, a lot of stuff that is obviously critical from a Microsoft standpoint. So 60% of the endpoints are largely unprotected today until solutions like Zimperium come along. So there's no visibility. And by the way, it's even worse because the user is the admin of these mobile devices, whether it's BYOD or corporate. There is no patch management system. So the user is the one that actually has to decide when they're going to upgrade. It spends 80% of the time outside of the protected corporate network. The user decides what networks they're going to connect to. The user decides what apps they're going to install, et cetera, et cetera. So the simple fact is, endpoint security now has to include mobile. And even if you look at like the hype cycle on endpoint security from Gartner, last year it was the hype cycle for endpoint and mobile security. This year it's the hype cycle for mobile security. For endpoint security. So they put them all together into one bucket. Side note on Gartner, they call this space mobile threat defense. That's what we do. And if we plug in with MDMs and MAMs, the definitive guide that they put out every year, the market guide for mobile threat defense, just came out last week, tail end of last week. You can get a copy of it on our website, complimentary copy, and it actually kind of really talks about the whole space. So I highly recommend doing that. So mobile endpoints are, in fact, under attack. One of the things that we always do, because we need to, is talk about level setting. And what we mean by that is we have thousands of customers around the world, literally thousands of customers, tens of millions of endpoints. 100% of those customers detect mobile threats and attacks, 100%. So the minute you turn the lights on that 60%, you start to detect threats. Now, this is one of those things that once we start talking about it, you're going to see it everywhere. We joke that it's similar to the arrow in the FedEx logo. Once somebody points it out to you, you can never unsee it, right? So now you're going to start to see all this information out there. And really, when you start looking at all of this, it really becomes, kind of a, what's the right word, recondite, that people don't understand that this is a real threat. It's not that hard to comprehend that this is a real threat when you stop and look at it, and also stop and look at it from the standpoint of an attacker. Because when an attacker, land and expand has always been one of their strategies. And so they're always going to go after the weakest link and make their way in. Considering the fact that 60% of these endpoints are spending 80% of their time outside of the network in the hands of users as the admin connecting to any network and installing any app, it's pretty obvious why the bad guys would want them, because then those phones walk back into the network. So it really isn't that hard to comprehend that, that it's a real issue. One of the things that's interesting, I mentioned land and expand as a time-tested law. Another time-tested law in security has always been persistence. For as long as the bad guys have gone after any system inside of a network, they've wanted to be persistent as long as possible in order to maximize their ROI, frankly. They spent the investment to take over a server, a point of sale, or a mobile device. They need to get their return by staying there as long as humanly possible, right? Well, in mobile, because all apps are in containers, the only way to actually be persistent is to truly compromise the device. On traditional endpoints, including Windows, Linux, et cetera, you could actually go be an app and you could go sideways through other apps and be persistent all day long without actually having to, say, gain root access on the device. So you could do that over there. In mobile, you can't. The only way that you can have any power above an individual app container is to actually compromise the device, elevate privileges, root access, have a malicious profile on iOS. There's 3 different primary attack vectors that we detect, that's what our job is, that all ultimately lead to that compromise. Malicious apps, we did a whole thing on it last week with an announcement where we're actually, every app that's coming into the Google Play Store is being vetted by us now. We also pointed out, by the way, the majority of malicious apps actually come from third-party app stores. Google actually does a really good job of vetting the ones coming into Google Play. Malicious apps are largely consumer fraud, like BankBot as an example. As a matter of fact, we've got a webinar tomorrow on one of the proof points of our machine learning engine, which is a whole series of families of malicious apps that we detected, some of which were new and some of which were families that have been around for a long time that were not in any of the industry databases when we found them. So we're doing a little case study. So if you're really interested in malicious apps, you can come back and look at that tomorrow. From an enterprise standpoint, it's not the primary enterprise threat, but it can deliver an exploit. And the reason I say it's not the primary threat is bad guys are smart at what they do. If they're targeting an enterprise, they're going to find better ways of targeting an enterprise than dropping an app in the App Store or Google Play and praying somebody from the company downloads it. They're going to try phishing. 90% of breaches start with phishing, and 2/3 of emails are read on mobile. And then, oh, by the way, there's new vectors on mobile that don't even exist on traditional endpoints that are outside of the purview of traditional corporate phishing, anti-phishing solutions. Personal email, messenger, texting. Those are all new ways to establish over there. And again, once you hit that website, an exploit can be delivered to compromise the device. So it's more targeted, but it's not the primary vector yet from a compromising a mobile device standpoint. That is network attacks. If I'm targeting XYZ company, the most efficient way of compromising a device is set up a fake Wi-Fi network. The phone connects to it thinking that it's the coffee shop across the street or the corporate network. I can scan their device, see what operating system they're on, which is going to be out of date because the user is the one who's actually establishing these policies or deciding when they're going to update. And then I can deliver the right exploit to compromise the device. Our data shows that 90% of the targeted attacks start with a network attack. Said differently, 9 times out of 10, the bad guy owns the network. And since the bad guy owns the network 9 times out of 10, you can't rely on a cloud-based detection service like you can in a traditional EDR capacity. So in basically mobile EDR, which is what Zimperium does. MTD is mobile EDR, if you really boil it down to doing it correctly. You need to do your detection on device. And that's because the bad guy owns the network 9 times out of 10. This is from Gartner, the same document I just got finished mentioning, came out last week. Same thing about on-device agent provides better likelihood of persistence. We have one engine. It detects these 4 things. I'm getting to Intune right now, by the way. It detects these 4 things. And on device, so it can survive even when the bad guys are doing something. Z9 can be rolled out in one of 2 ways. Either a product called ZIPS, which stands for Z Intrusion Prevention System. If you're trying to protect the device 100% of the time, use ZIPS. If, however, you have a mobile app, you can drop it with an SDK called ZApp for in-app protection directly inside of your mobile app. The easy way is to describe this as some of our banking customers. They're using ZIPS to protect their employees, devices, and both corporate and BYOD, and they're using ZApp to protect mobile banking users. Both of those come into a cloud-based console. One of the advantages, another advantage of doing on-device detection is we are completely cloud agnostic. As a matter of fact, we do a significant amount of work on Azure. We're the only major player that can operate its console on Azure. The cloud-based detection folks are all locked into one service, and it happens to be AWS. We can actually operate in any cloud. We're also the only one that's FedRAMP ATO on the Amazon side of things. But like I said, we do a lot of work with Azure. We integrate in with the largest set of UEMs, including one we're going to talk about right now. We can also handle multiple UEMs in a single tenant. So if you're transitioning from one, let's say over to Intune, which we're seeing a lot of, you don't have to slow down your mobile threat defense solution until you do that. All the data goes into our SIEM, and then behind Z Console, we have a capability called Z3A. Z9 will detect malicious apps, but then there's perfectly legitimate apps that are in your environment that have huge security and privacy risks. If you want an example of that, we did a webinar last week on the top shopping apps just in time for Christmas. And we talked about all the security and privacy risks in these top 30 apps that are by some of the best, but there are huge privacy risks that are in there. So with that, so you now understand, we are the ones that detect device network phishing attacks. We do threat detection, risk detection, that's our job. We then work with a UEM in almost every instance to say, this is what we're going to do. Most of our customers today, almost all of our customers today, are using the MDM part of UEM, device management, full device management, mostly for corporate applications, including a lot of folks that are using Intune. A couple weeks ago, Microsoft announced at Ignite, Intune, this is their headline from their blog, Microsoft Intune brings mobile threat defense to unenrolled BYO devices. So one of the main things for a lot of folks, it's the standard messaging that comes from Apple, standard messaging that comes from Google when you install an MDM. It's a scary message. It says this corporation can access all your this, it can wipe all of this, it can see all of this. And so a lot of people, particularly in BYOD scenarios, are like, no. This is my phone, this is my tablet. I still want to work and I'm paying for it. So I'm already paying for it, but I still want to get my work done. There's no way I'm going to let you see all my photos and wipe my phone. No, I'm just not going to do it. So MDMs and just the scary messaging and the thought about privacy has really impacted the adoption of BYOD. So, but then if you open that up, how do you know, especially since the users are the admin, how do you know that it's safe? How do you know that there's a capability? So 2 different worlds are now converging. What is technically called MAM, Mobile Application Management, and MTD. Both of these have been around, but now they're coming together with Microsoft. Now, I think it's very important because there's a lot of misinformation about the whole MAM side of things and everything. Here's the facts about Microsoft Intune MAM. First thing is, all of the major Microsoft solutions that everybody wants to get access to on mobile have the MAM SDK. They have a little SDK, the Intune MAM SDK inside of them. And I'm going to talk about a workflow, how this whole thing works together with mobile threat defense. But MAM's been around for a while. But the thing where there's a little bit of misinformation is that SDK is freely available to any app developer. There's a huge number of apps outside of the Microsoft ecosystem that already have that SDK inside of it. And even internally developed apps, it doesn't take much to drop that SDK in it. So the main initial driver for BYOD is, I want access to my email, right? So it's like, okay, there's Outlook. Now, obviously that's that. But once you start doing it, the workflow I'm about to talk about works with any app. And so it's very effective. And the way that Microsoft has gone about doing this, and we partnered with Microsoft to drive a lot of the requirements of the workflow that I'm about to talk about, it's really smart because you're starting with the core applications that people want, Office 365, Outlook, but then you can expand it to cover however you want to cover your BYOD scenarios. Another thing that's pretty interesting for me, we've got a lot of customers that are on other UEMs for corporate that are strongly directly going towards Intune for BYOD, especially in light of this announcement where MAM and MTD are combining together. So if we talk about that, Zimperium is one of the companies that can actually fit into this. I think it helps a lot to really understand the workflow. And as we dive into the workflow, we've been integrated with Intune for years now. We have dozens and dozens of customers that are Intune MDM. Our integration for that is identical. There's no change. Matter of fact, in the same Intune instance that's integrated in with Zimperium, with zConsole and with Zips, as I was showing you, you could actually handle the corporate-owned devices with a certain set of groups. We have the most granular group-based policies of any MTD player. One of those groups or a few of those groups can be your BYOD using MAM. So it's one implementation, very clean. And again, don't forget, we're the guys that run on Azure. So a lot of the Microsoft stuff really, really clicks with us. So this is just a quote from Brad Anderson. Brad is the gent that runs this whole side of their business. I won't read the entire thing, but basically loves working with companies like Zimperium to protect not only enrolled, but now BYOD devices. So how does this actually work, right? How does this actually work? Now, I apologize. My visuals are not the absolute best visuals in the world. I was going to try and embed an actual video in here, but I was having my own set of technical difficulties with it. But you'll understand the flow, okay? Really cool pictures. You can see that I've pulled out the best graphic talent in the business to be able to do this. Here's the workflow of how this operates. Obviously, you've got the various different clouds there. Zimperium, you've got Intune Azure, you've got the app stores, and then you've got the person's phone or device, obviously. And the device has, in this particular case, Outlook, right? With the MAM SDK inside of it. So first thing that happens is that, which happens with all of our Intune integrations, we believe that you've already created all your groups in AAD and it's already integrated in with Intune. You've already established all of that. There's no reason to do that with us. So we sync all that stuff automatically. So the first thing is we're now in sync. We've got all the right groups. We can establish whatever kind of policies you want by a group-based policy standpoint. The first time a user goes and logs in to that new app, and this messaging is a little bit dated, but it still gives you the idea. When you first go, what's really interesting about the way that they're implementing this is, if your organization says we're going to Intune MAM with MTD, when somebody goes to access that, in this case Outlook, but it could have been any of your apps that have the SDK built into it, the first thing it does is go, whoa, 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 hold up. You don't get access to this until you install, this says download from MTD vendor. It would literally say Zimperium Zips. So what it's doing, which is really interesting, is one of the issues with traditional mobile threat defense, like any solution, in the MDM side of the world is, how do I actually get people to install the app itself? Well, in this case, if you've decided I'm going to do mobile threat defense as a solution, so I at least know the risk posture of this device. Now, it's not an MDM, so you're not getting access to all their camera and their the pictures and personal email, and you can't wipe their device or anything like that. That's because it's MAM, it's not MDM, right? But they've actually implemented it where it says, before you access this app, you need to install the mobile threat solution. You click on it, flow gets installed, now it's activated. Now, once the user, or once, let's say, so users off doing their whole thing, they can access it originally until Zips detects something that needs to be fixed. When we detect something that needs to get fixed, again, on device, because that's what we do, we're the on-device guys, right? That information and the forensics and the event information go into our console. Forensics can go off to your SIM or your EDR solution, whatever the case may be. We set the Intune device level to high based on whatever policies have been set by the organization. And because that device is now a high-risk device, when the user goes to log into Outlook, for instance, it basically says, hold up, no. You don't get access to this until you go back to Zips and fix the problem. It could be you're on a malicious network and we're like, you just gotta get off that network. It could be there's a malicious app installed and we're like, you gotta uninstall it. Whatever the policy is, whatever the case that made it where the risk posture went too high, they have to fix that. Now there's two options depending on how risk averse you wanna be. One is where you basically go, nope, you don't get access to it right now. The next level down is not only do you not get access to it, we're going to wipe the app's local data off your device. So all your Outlook files, or so a lot of people don't know, all of your attachments in your email are on one folder on your device. So if I'm like, whoa, this guy's coming in, he's about to access Outlook, and based on who he is in the organization, say he's an executive, we're going to not only block it, we're going to temporarily, you're not going to have any of this data on your device until you actually fix that, right? Again, the only thing that we're messing with is the app itself or the data of the app itself. So all of the other BYOD, all the other privacy issues and everything are not there. It's strictly corporate data. So it works really, really, really nicely. So with that, I thank you guys for your time. I hope it made sense in terms of what we're doing. I'm going to stop for a second and see if you have any questions. And then if not, we will wrap up and give you the rest of your day back. Okay, I don't see any questions. Well, thank you all very much. If you do have any questions after the fact, feel free just to shoot me an email and I can make sure to either answer it myself or provide the information through somebody else. That's jt.keating, Keating, @zimperium.com. Thank you very much. Have yourself a great day.